Hello, my name is Andrew Thake. I'm a director at Resourcing Tomorrow. Delighted to be joined today by Alison Allen, who's a director, European Mining and Minerals Lead at SLR. Delighted to have you with us today, Alison.
Thank you for having me.
Alison, how can the mining industry effectively shorten projects' timelines along the song curve while maintaining the highest standards of due diligence and environmental sustainability?
Yeah, okay, good question. And this is stemming from the fact that the timeline for permitting seems to have got longer and longer over the past sort of 4 or 5 years, really. So in my experience, the real key to this is early integration of permitting into the project design. So it needs to be treated as part of that design process instead of like a sort of post-feasibility hurdle. And that does make quite a big difference. When you've got that early and active regulatory engagement, it can hugely reduce delays. It doesn't compromise standards because you're still going through the same process.
Are there specific examples where this has been successfully achieved?
So I guess the one that comes to mind is Adriatic metals, Bosnia, and that one is probably one of the fastest permitting processes, certainly Europe-wide, for a long, long time, and probably the most recent mining project that's actually got to production in that sort of region in the last 10-15 years. So yeah, they have done a good job in getting to that point. And that one, it was part of the leadership. It was part of their sort of strategic approach, was looking at that early stage optioneering, but also really early stakeholder mapping and understanding the sort of risks and regional requirements so that they could just follow it through. And it meant that their project design was done in an iterative process.
What innovative solutions or policy alignments could address the often conflicting regulations at federal and regional levels to streamline permitting processes?
Okay. So I guess mapping, overlaying and overlapping those regulatory regimes is really quite critical, because really understanding your project timelines, but also those sort of crunch points in those particular regimes is really critical to understanding your route map and roadmap. You know what? It would be so good to see more joint permitting task forces to take the pressure off the project and actually look at it from a regulatory standpoint, and maybe even those sort of shared digital platforms, aligning those approaches so that we can avoid that duplication. That would be brilliant.
How can governments and industry collaboratively design a more cohesive permitting framework?
Yeah, so it is that. It's those task forces. It's building things that actually talk to each other and enables projects to really understand where there are perhaps conflicting requirements.
And then in terms of another key area is the area of building trust in with local communities. Can you give us an example of some early transparent stakeholder engagement strategies that have actually then helped to reduce permitting delays? And, can you sort of talk a little bit about those best practices?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the first thing that I was talking about, but also following on through. So trust is super important, and that's your key to project success, and it's built through consistent two-way communication. It's not simply just telling people what the project is doing, but it's allowing people to interact and be part of that journey, really. And it does really help you identify concerns, particular elements that either a community or regulator or stakeholder really has at the top of their agenda. Adriatic is a brilliant example, but there are sort of a number of that are in that space. But do you know what? The sad thing is, I can probably list a lot more bad examples than good ones. So it is critical to avoid those pitfalls, and we can learn from not just the same industry. So mining sector is one element, but another industry that has gone through it as well is that energy sector and getting permitting for wind farms and wind turbines. And actually SLR work in not just the mining space, we work in infrastructure and energy and other areas. So it's quite nice to be able to bring some of that thought process of how to really engage and how to build trust with communities, to understand that it's not, you know, creating the black hole is where you're going to allow people to fill that hole, and they will fill it with fake news and things that are perhaps not in the project or even the region's interest. But unless you've got that open dialogue, you can't really counteract that.
You mentioned SLR's expertise in both the energy sector as well as the mining sector. Are there any particular lessons or takeaways that the mining sector can learn from the energy sector and how they are tackling streamlining challenges?
Do you know what? Both sectors can learn from each other, and we regularly do. So the energy sector has gone through a really rapid process in terms of, because obviously we didn't really have wind turbines or even solar farms or any of these sorts of things from, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, whereas mines have been around for a long, long time. So there's learnings from both sides. I would say what's been fascinating is the sort of understanding of what goes into a wind turbine and what goes into an actual wind farm and solar farm has now shifted, and that's largely down to the dialogue. Now, it helps that it's got a good news story behind it because it's about decarbonisation, but actually mining is learning from that dialogue as well, in that, you know, we are talking about critical raw materials, and we're talking about the raw materials for actually installing these wind farms and solar farms. So actually the whole story becomes really quite intertwined in terms of how we present the particular projects, but also communities' understandings of what the benefits of those projects are.
There's been a number of pieces of legislation aimed at fast-tracking priority projects. So in the United States, there's the invocation of the 1950 Defense Production Act.
Yeah.
I think in Canada, they've reintroduced the idea of streamlining permitting between the state level and the province level. In Europe, we've got the EU CMA, 47 strategic projects. That's now been expanded to 60. What's your assessment of those pieces of legislation? How will they make a difference? What more needs to be done on top of that?
Yeah, okay. They will make a difference. Well, in theory, they will make a difference. They haven't been used in anger, really, I don't think. The Critical Raw Materials Act really is designed to help streamline permitting provisions, and that is across the whole of that EU region. And so I think it's something like, is it 27 months for an extraction project and 15 months for the other types of projects. Now, the average permitting time in the EU is between 5 and 10 years. So that if the act is followed and the partners within Europe and the stakeholders get together and really do take that forward, there are huge benefits that can really be shown to projects and also the critical raw materials that we absolutely need in our region.
Alison, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure interviewing you, and we look forward to seeing you at Resourcing tomorrow.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much, Andrew.